All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessings and salutation to the whole elect out there pushing his word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful leg, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. All right, and what I want to get into with this lesson, we're dealing with how a little folly spoils great wisdom. And this lesson was inspired by some reading I was doing in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Now, when you read Ecclesiastes chapter 10 and verse 1, it said, dead flies causes the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. And you read this in NLT. As dead flies cause even a bottle of perfume to stink, so a little foolishness spoils great wisdom and honor. Okay? Little foolishness spoils great wisdom and honor. All right? And that's a precept, to show that we always have to continue to work on the inward man, okay? Because we grew up in the culture, all right, of folly. We grew up in the culture of folly. The things that the Lord hates, this society glorifies, okay? Certain character flaws that we have, okay? The Lord requires us, to constantly work on that inward man and begin to remove folly from us, man. Because a little folly can spoil wisdom and honor. So as we grow, there's certain things that have to constantly be removed. That's why it's a constant, self-analysis in the truth. When the scriptures speak about examining ourselves, man, it's a constant self-analysis to see where we at, man. And the Lord calls us to go through particular things, all right, to expose certain flaws and certain weaknesses that's within us that he wants removed. He requires us to make the adjustments, man, needed, to continue on in the faith, man. Okay? Because as we mature, man, and we get to the next phase of prophecy, man, there's certain character flaws and traits and folly of this world that has to be removed, man. So we can continue on, all right, becoming like Yahweh Shai. Okay? When you go here, let's get because even when you go to 1 Corinthians, it's the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 5. In verse 6 it says, your glorying is not good. Know ye not that a little leaven the whole lump? Understanding the concept of because he was going into the concept of the Passover. Now what you had in the church or current, you had this Jake who was dealing with his father's wife. And the Apostle Paul was like, look, y'all boasting in spiritual gifts and this and that, but y'all still got this guy around. And he was like, look, that's a problem. And that behavior can become, contagious in the faith. You see? So he was like, no, that got to be addressed. First off, he got to remove. He was likening this Jake that was going off as living. And that's why on both levels, because you have, certain Jake that the Lord has removed from camp, because his behavior can become a problem, can become contagious. And then there's certain things within us that the Lord removes out of us, man. Okay, so it don't get to the point to where we have to be removed from the body. You see, if we can't check these things inwardly and deal with these things and make the adjustments, but guess what? The Lord will remove us from the body. You see, it get to a point to where the folly, that leavening that's in us, that BS that's in us, all right, can grow to a point to where, we'll have to be removed from the body, man, to spare the body. So we want to always be mindful, and always do routine self-examinations, man. You know, a major part of this truth is self-examination, man. You can know the breakdowns, okay? You can be savvy in the history and whatever, the geopolitics, the words, you could be this great, you know, this great speaker, whatever. You see? But without self-examination, man, it's easy to veer off track, man. It's easy to veer off track, man. Speaking to myself, first and foremost. Okay? So this truth requires us, the Lord puts us in position. If we're the elect, man, the Lord gonna keep putting us in positions to purge. To purge, man. He gonna put us in position to identify certain flaws and folly and to purge them out. Okay? And it's a constant process until we're perfected, man. This is a constant process of going in and out of that fire, being refined until we're perfected, man. But we gotta be honest with ourselves about the folly that's in us, man. Okay? Now let's go from there. When you go to let's get that in first. 2 Corinthians 13:5. So it gets 2 Corinthians 13:5. It says, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves, because who knows us better than us, man? But it goes with, we have to be honest, because if we're not honest with ourselves, self-examination don't matter. We can't be biased when we examine ourselves, man, because it's us. Try to go into this way. I'm like this because of this. It don't even matter why you like that. This shit gotta change now. Okay? You're not here to discuss why you like that. It gotta change. Okay? Because it's easy to get into that victim mode where I'm like this because of this and this and this and this happened and I'm like, nah, man. It don't matter. We all went through traumatic things, man. Some more than others. But at the end of the day, none of that matters now because we have the tools needed to heal. We got Yahweh shot. And the scriptures is like, look, at Yahweh shot, like, look, follow me. You're going to be all right. You're going to heal. When we, all right, move according to the scriptures, when we apply the scriptures, when we make adjustments, when we measure ourselves to the scriptures and make adjustments, we're measuring ourselves to Yahweh shot and adjusting ourselves to measure up to Yahweh shot, man. Okay, which is stronger than all the trauma we done been through, all the trauma we got. Yahweh Shai is stronger than that. So as we follow Yahweh Shai begins to heal us from these things, man. Okay, but we have to be honest when we make that self-examination. When the Lord exposes things in us, man, we gotta be honest with ourselves, man. Okay, it says, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves how that Yahweh Shai HaMashiach is in you, except ye be reprobates, man. Okay? And reprobate is someone that's moving without judgment, man. Okay? And we don't want to be reprobate, man. Out here without sound judgment, man. Okay? It's constantly, justifying ourselves and making moves. Okay? Just winging it, man. Okay, nah, man, we want to be in tune with the spirit of Yahweh by Shemal Shah. We want to be in order with our power. Okay? When you go to, let's go here. Because this truth is what we really begin to find ourselves, man. We really grow into what the Lord intended us to be, man. It's one of the constant prayers of mine is asking the Lord for me to just keep growing into what you intended me to be. All right, what I need to be for you. We're growing into what we need to be for Yahweh Bashem Al Shai. Okay, and it's different. You see, every brother, is different, man, because each brother is customized. All right, to serve the Lord in their own unique manner. Okay, now, of course, there's a standard. As we rehearse the law, we rehearse the righteous acts. There's a uniform standard, okay, that we all, abide by, okay? And within that, all right, there's, in fact, let's get this real quick, but within that standard, you see, there's certain things, that the Lord, has, because it's certain things that certain brothers can do, within our liberty that other brothers can't do because it would be a hindrance to them. Okay, it's certain things that brothers can do that the Most High allows them to do for balance that other brothers it'll destroy them. Okay, so this is a thing of really finding, the balance to serve the Lord the best. Each brother got their own balance, all right, that puts them in a position to serve the Lord the best. Okay, when you go to Sirach 37:27 says, "My son, prove thy soul and thy life, and see what is evil for it, and give not that unto it." So even on another level, beyond the law, because there's things that are lawful that we can do, okay, but is it good for my office? We have to ask ourselves, okay, I can do this, but is that good for my office? Another brother can pull it off and he good. He can fulfill his office and do that. Okay? I can't do that and fulfill my office. You see? So even beyond the law, man, even when it goes into certain lifestyles, certain decisions, certain, regimens, and, some brothers can go to sleep at 12 and wake up at 5 like lightning bolts, man. Okay? Hey, some brothers, they gotta go to sleep at 10 or they be through. You see? So even when you go into, because as we become an elite, okay, hey, the detail, even the details matter now. Okay? So as we're becoming elite within our office, even the details matter now. Okay? Because that's what separates a Hall of Famer from, just a mediocre player. Well, it's in the details, because everybody can run fast, everybody can jump high. Okay? But what separates, the greats from the rest is they go into the details. And as we're servants of Yahweh Bashim Shai, we have to pay attention to the details, man. What's hurting us, okay? And what's helping us, man. What's good for the spirit, what's bad for the spirit. You see? Verse 28 said, "For all things are not profitable for all men, neither have every soul pleasure in everything," man. And just because, most brothers might be into something, that don't mean you have to be into that. Certain things that brothers into, every brother not into the same thing. Okay? That's the thing, finding, what the Lord wants for us to do, fulfill our office, man. And that makes us a bigger asset to the body, to everyone. That's the thing about serving the Lord, is we're becoming who the Lord wants us to be. Everybody benefits from it, not just us. So going here, and it's all about the Lord refining us to become, judges with Yahweh, kings with Yahweh, man. When you go to Isaiah 1 and 25, all right, this is the book of Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 25. And it says, "And I will turn my hand upon thee, and purely purge away thy dross, and take away all thy sin." You see? So the Lord has his hand on his elect. He's dealing. You see? The Lord hands on dealing with the elect, man. And that's why he takes us through things to purge us, man. Refine us to be what we need to be for him. And us becoming what we need to be for him. All right? We become what we need to be for the body. Okay? Verse 26, "And I will restore thy judges as at the first, and thy counselors at the beginning. Afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city." So we're being restored. We're going through a restoration process, man. So it's a continual cycle of purging, self-examining, okay, realigning ourselves, man. You know, elevating, applying more discipline. You see, making adjustments constantly, man, until we're changed, man. But it's an end game to this, man, and that's the elect, all right, becoming perfected, man. Beginning with the first fruits, becoming, all right, joint heirs for Yahushua, man. You see? So yeah, man, just wanted to get into that. Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you few sisters edified. Till next time, I say shalom. Kwam Yasha Allah, Abba Soon, shalom.